I've always seen my dad working super hard, born like in a little farm town, Brazil, very poor family. He just dedicated his whole life just to try to make our lives better. By just seeing the behavior, I think it tells more than just hearing someone tell you what to do. You know what I mean? And I think that applies for everything, right?
All right, today we have an exceptional guest, and I mean exceptional. He's one that's made waves in the world of sales and revenue operations. He started his career in a tech startup in Santa Monica where he helped generate and scale B2B lead generation operations. He transitioned into high-ticket sales before diving full-time into building a highly leveraged technology-enabled system sales team with AI and automations like nothing anyone has ever seen. Not only has he made a significant impact in sales, he also believes in the power of incremental improvement, focusing on 1% better each day to achieve your goals faster, and we'll get into that. Fun fact, he's a fitness enthusiast, and he's also completed a 72-hour fast. At 21 years old, with zero experience on the phone, he immersed himself into learning and making $15,000 his second month of commission-only sales. He's faced his challenges. He's always figured out a way to overcome them. Guys, get ready for an insightful conversation. I want to say this person right here is probably responsible for the reason the sales agency has been able to scale to over $200 million in just 5 years. He's a surfer, a husband, a brother to me. I should say a brother from another mother to me. And he's the definition of savage. I call him Mr. Next Level. Guys, help me welcome the one, the only, the Antonio Man. What's up, Antonio Man?
Let's go, man.
Awesome.
Thanks for the intro. That's epic.
Yes, I think you might have forgot, because one of the things that happened here, not a lot of people know about this, but you will now, is Antonio was here about 6 months or so ago, and we recorded this podcast. We had a little bit of a technical malfunction, and so about 3 minutes of that episode is what the audio caught, and that was about it. And so we're here now. We're gonna redo it again, and so I'm confident that is gonna be a next level episode. But what I want to start with, dude, because this is the one thing I've noticed about you, Antonio, and it really inspires me. You're from Brazil. You came here to the States, and I'd love to get into your story of how you ended up in Santa Monica and how you met myself, Rich, Ken, all of that. I want to definitely get into that. But dude, you have a drive like not a lot of people, very few people I've ever seen. Where the heck does that drive stem from?
Well, I mean, like, first of all, thanks for having me again, man. Our
Thanks
first conversation was super epic. And I hope this one, it's not only as epic, but better. It's actually a great question. I think it's a combination of factors. Obviously, like, I've always seen my dad working super hard. He came from really like nothing, was born like in a little farm town, Brazil, like the 13th kid from, you know, a very poor family. So I think he just dedicated his whole life just to try to make our lives better. And I mean, growing up with this, seeing this, I think I took as inspiration and obviously have my own reasons, but I think it all starts from kind of like your initial role models, right? So I think that was the first driver, I would say, to that. So shout out to my dad.
Shout out Pops. We gotta give another one to Pops right here. Let's go. No, dude, I love that because I relate to it because I think I've seen the same. I believe your parents live in Brazil, are from Brazil. My parents immigrated here from communist Armenia. You know, I had the wonderful opportunity to be here. But that's the one thing that I saw growing up too, was like how hard my dad would work to give the better life, right? So leading by example is what I'm kind of hearing in this. And I think there's something to be said, right? Especially in a sales organization, I think everything's top down and you have to lead by example. And if you have great leaders, then hopefully you're going to be able to create and manifest and train and grow great closers, right? And I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like to your point about like the example of how you act is only what matters, right? Like, because you can, for example, at your household, I don't have kids yet, but whatever your kid is doing, he's not doing what you tell him to do. He's just doing what you do. So my dad never had to tell me like, oh, you got to work hard. But every single day I just saw him waking up early, working, traveling, and just grinding. And by just seeing the behavior, I think it tells more than just hearing someone tell you what to do. You know what I mean? And I think that applies for everything, right? Because in today's day and age, right, there's abundance of information. You could literally find how to make $1 billion if you want, but it's not a matter of like how you make it. It's just a matter of like if you're capable of executing. because the execution is what's the biggest lever you can have, right? So it goes like, as you said, in a sales org or in a business as a whole, right? If I ask my people, my team, to work on the weekends, dude, I better be working as
That's
well.
right.
You know what I mean? So it's just something where it's like you have to set the example in a way where they don't have to question if what you're saying is true, because you've been practicing so much that what they do is just try to replicate, if that makes sense. So it's a great question to start, by the way. It's a very big
To
question.
piggy on that, like I'm curious to your thoughts. If someone hasn't had that example like you and I had, we've had, it sounds like, amazing fathers. If someone hasn't had an amazing father, but is looking for that or it doesn't know where to find that or just needs guidance, like what would you maybe recommend that person start if they haven't had that example growing up now, if they're looking to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something that I just would preface, right? Because even though like my relationship with my father and my family, it's what helped me kind of have this drive. At the same time, like people have the idea, at least I'll just share my example. The drive isn't necessarily like healthy to an extent, right? Because if you have a level of drive to accomplish something, you have to be willing to sacrifice a lot. So for me, for example, when I moved here, I was already going to school in Brazil. I was working in management consulting, and I've decided like to move to the US where the currency exchange is it's much higher, right? So there was already a chip on my shoulder in terms of like, I got to show an ROI, so to speak. But there was no pressure from my parents. There was just something in my mind that would just tell me this, right? It's better be worth it. So when you get to school, like obviously a lot of people have a different mentality. So you have to be willing to pay the price for something that it's not guaranteed. And I think that's what I did. And that's what I do like until this day, right? Like it's not easy to just keep grinding all the time, to keep pursuing, to just keep trying to get things to improve, because that comes on the expense of time with friends, time with family, sometimes your mental health. So it's like what I want to say, if you're looking for kind of enabling that drive within you, there's a combination between inspiration and desperation. So like you can be inspired to do something, but for the most part, you have to have a level of pain and being uncomfortable with your position that it's not going to be great. It's not going to feel great. And that's what I think like it trips people up, because at the same time they want to have that drive, but that drive has a lot of like collateral damage.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It's cool to achieve the things that, we've been able to accomplish, but at the same time, if I were to share what I have to go through to try to get where I am with no guarantee that this was going to happen, I don't know if most people would trade spots.
Yeah.
So wherever you're at in your life, if you want to kind of enable that drive, you just got to be willing to change your identity and be open to disappointing some people around you, which is another topic that we can go when it comes to like, how do you want to change your life, right?
Yeah. Well, man, I think that's so powerful. And I mean, you said so much that I couldn't unpack there, but I think people should understand, I want to talk like what I'd love to get into so people understand a little bit more about your story and how you ended up here, right? Antonio basically came here from Brazil. English is not your first language, correct me if I'm wrong, right? You realize there's a massive currency exchange difference coming here, and you realize you don't have the dependency of your parents and anybody that you know in Brazil, so you're basically starting from scratch over here. Now, I want to preface this, and I want to understand like how you got to Santa Monica, what you ended up doing there, how you ended up meeting us, and all that. But I want you guys to know, right? Antonio is someone who started in sales, right? But he got started in tech, came into sales to be commission only, had 15K months, right? And then eventually went on to be the tech wizard of 1CC, like literal wizardry. So walk us through, you're coming here from Brazil, right? You're started in Santa Monica, you landed your first gig. Like, how do you land that gig? And tell me about what you realized in that gig as far as them and their systems and how they didn't have basically any setups, and how you brought that up into the organization and did what you did. And then I'd love to once you share that, because I want you to talk about the journey. I want you to people to understand, like, it wasn't easy. Like, you had a lot of things and barriers in front of you that you had to overcome. You had to continue showing up, even though you did, like you said, you didn't feel like it, but you continued showing up. So walk us through, how did you end up here? How did you land the first gig? What did that look like? And then I want to transition into the 1CC side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, since I moved here, there was a series of events that kind of led me to have that drive. And to some extent, those events weren't as good, right? Like in a sense of like they weren't happy, they weren't fulfilling. So when I moved here, obviously I had a visa that wouldn't allow me to work whenever I wanted, whatever I wanted. So I've always had in my mind that I wanted to work online from a laptop since I was like 16.
The
So
laptop lifestyle.
yeah, exactly. Moved to Bali, work online, X, Y, and Z. Like since I was 16, I just dreamed about that. And when I moved here, I just saw that as the only opportunity for me to get something going, right? So when I got here, I was sharing a room with a guy from Hawaii right in front of the train station. So it was like 6 a.m. The train was just like, dude, the doors would like freaking shake. And like my dad, he had like the means, but he didn't give me anything in a sense of like he didn't give me a car or he didn't like made my life easy, right? So I just had like $100 rusty bike that I had to go like do groceries with like a Adidas bag. And it was just like I went from a place where it's like groceries were done and like you had a car and all of the like comforts to a place where it's like sharing a room, living with 6 other guys, just having to go do groceries with my bike and an Adidas bag, having to take the bus. So it's like very different stuff, which obviously, I mean, like I'm in California, so I'm very grateful, you know?
Yeah.
It's still like very good, so to speak. But all those things just led me to like, man, like I can't work anywhere. I got to figure out something. So I got a job at school, like just at a library for like minimum wage. But at the same time, with that money that I was making, I just started doing like Amazon publishing, and then that didn't work out. I started doing. So it's interesting because with the Amazon publishing, it was a very telling moment because when I started, it actually started to work out in a sense of like I was making $300 days, like in my second month.
Wow.
But whenever I shared this with people, they weren't very happy about my success. So that was like one of the first moments where I've noticed that like for me to get where I wanted to go, I had to just make some decisions, right? And this was happening, this was good, but at the third month, my account got shut down. So I just completely lost everything. And it's interesting because Amazon has a 60-day payout window. So I actually didn't make any money.
Dang.
The first month was very bad. And then the second and third were good, but the account got shut down. So
No
I
money,
ended up
honey.
making zero money, spending all my money like from work into this. And I was just literally eating like minute rice and canned tuna like almost every day and cottage cheese. So it wasn't like, kind of a pretty easy, like let's just do it by inspiration. It was like, man, like this failed. I remember like I was in my room, super upset, like crying and stuff, and there's nothing I could do about it. So go to the next one, which was drop shipping. So I saved some more money, started doing drop shipping, and then it started improving a little bit. I didn't tell people what I was doing. I just kept it to myself, just kept learning, bought programs as well with the money that I was making from school. And then, long story short, I started scaling this one product, and it went to a point where I made a 40K month in revenue and made about like $9,000 in like profits with ads, costs, taxes, and stuff. And then my PayPal account got shut down. So basically with drop shipping, how it works is like when you sell with PayPal, you have to import the tracking codes into PayPal. Otherwise, they're just gonna like shut down your account. And that's what I did. So I had about $18,000 there, which they withheld for 180 days.
Damn.
And every money that went through that came in after this suspension, 20% of it I could withdraw. And the 80% I could only withdraw in 180 days. So it was basically like zero cash flow.
Yeah.
So I had to borrow money from my dad to buy the inventory that I had to ship, and I had to shut everything down. And that was the beginning. It wasn't that cool. All the money that I made ended up being lost in the sense of like I had to use for things that I wasn't expecting. But, everything that I was doing, I was learning something. I was learning a little bit more, not only about like the technical stuff, but a little bit more about me, right? Of why do I want to go? What do I want to do? And just reinforcing, right, that it was possible.
Yeah.
So when I failed on these two things, that was like a 2-year period where I finished my college in Santa Barbara.
Dang, so 2 years has gone by in all of this different stuff you're experimenting with.
Yeah, and then
did you guys hear that? 2 years. This wasn't an overnight process. This wasn't a couple months. This wasn't a few months. 2 years.
yeah, and I mean, like, it goes back to even before I moved to the US. I had like YouTube channels in Brazil. Like, I always tried to make something, you know, and that's what people don't realize. Like, it's hard. Like, it's a fact that people try to sell as if something is easy and like guaranteed, but it's pretty hard. Like, it's very hard, very difficult. Obviously, you gotta persevere a lot and you gotta be willing to take risks. And it's something that I didn't say, but like when I was doing the drop shipping, I needed more money because I wanted to buy this program. And it was $3K from like an e-commerce guy. And my friend used to work in a car wash. So I started working in a car wash. So I was doing car wash and working at school and doing the drop shipping.
Damn.
While I was like kind of trying to make things work, because that money I could just save up and use for my ads, testing products, and all of that stuff, right? So I mean, like, when I was doing that, obviously I looked around and all the people that were going to school, like the majority of them weren't like doing that, right? So it goes back to your initial question of the drive. What pushed me? The fact that I just wanted to be different. You know, I just wanted to make money, man. Like, I wanted to accomplish the goal that I had, which was to be able to generate an income online and literally like get an ROI for what I was doing in terms of coming here and like spending all this money. So I didn't go to a lot of parties when I was in school. I didn't date a lot of people. I didn't like make a lot of friends. So if people were to ask me like, oh wow, like, why do you do what you do? And like, what's up with the drive and stuff? I mean, like, you just have to accept that you're going to lose something in order to gain on others. But you have to accept that you're going to lose without the guarantee that you're going to gain. And that is the biggest challenge for people because they can't accept the risk without the reward. If you don't risk, you won't likely get the type of reward that you're looking for. When I moved to LA was when I started applying for internships because I didn't have the car wash job anymore. It was in Santa Barbara and the job at school. And then I applied to a ton of internships, like 100. And one of them, like, it was a startup in Santa Monica for e-commerce, a Shopify app. And they called me and they accepted me. I told them like, hey, this is what I did. This is my track record. And then they were like, okay, come over. And then like, it was pretty cool there. I mean, it was a great experience. The guy that I used to work with, he was just awesome guy. But it was just a new startup. So there wasn't a lot of like funding. There wasn't a lot of things that were in place. And I remember the first day that I got there, the guy asked me to get like answers in a form, copy paste them into the CRM. And I read through the onboarding. I was like starting doing this task. I was like, man, like there must be a way that like we could just do that, you know? Like this is just so boring. And then I Google it. I found this tool called Zapier, which is now like almost everybody knows and uses and all that. But that was like 5-6 years ago, I think.
Yeah, not as popular.
Yeah. And then I just set up the Zapier and I told him like, dude, set up the Zapier. They submit the form, they go to CRM. And if they are not qualified, they receive an email saying they're not qualified. Amazing. So what else can I do? And then like, I was just trying to like eliminate the busy work by automating if it was just a standard task with like specific sets of procedures, right? And then I kept doing this. And that was a point where my money from PayPal got released.
Ah, the 18.
Yeah.
You got taken 20% of it. So whatever was
Yeah.
left.
So there was left about like 18,000. I had to pay back my dad $10,000. And then with this $8,000, I bought another program. The program wasn't like 8,000, was 3,000, but it was a program called Sales Process IO.
Sales Process IO.
From Nick Cosman. It was a great program, man. Like, I just devoured that thing, like, watched multiple times. And there was a section there for outbound prospecting. And when I learned about that, and then when I realized that, like, they weren't doing that, they were just receiving inbound leads, I was like, guys, can I try to do this here? I just have this mapped out and just I implemented the process that I learned in the program there with their approval, of course. And it ended up like generating, you know, it's not a lot of leads, but it's like 40, 50 extra leads a month from like specific Shopify stores. Because the app was just like a marketing app that you would put in your store. It was a pixel. And then you would retarget your audience on a performance based. So like they would just charge for ads if the person clicked through through their ads. So they needed to get like big companies because otherwise they wouldn't have the traffic. They
Right.
needed to make money. But out of this 50, like 2, 3 converted and they were pretty good. When we started doing this, which was like LinkedIn outbound, we started generating results. And then I started realizing, man, like I can do these things, you know? And all my knowledge from like Shopify and the Kindle stuff like helped me to figure out how to do this, right? Because knowledge is just one of the highest leverage things that you can have, right? But that knowledge has to be linked with agency. I mean, like, I'll tell you this story, but just to finish up like that point on Clickly that you've asked, Clickly was the name of the startup in Santa Monica. I just kept doing that to the point where by the time I left there, they had an email outreach process and a LinkedIn outreach process that was just repeatable and it generated results. So I know that I left them in a better place than I found.
Yep.
But depending on like my drive, depending on like how I perceived the initial task that I was doing, I could have left there just like copy and pasting the form, you know? It goes to show that like a lot of people, they just like to be told what to do. And if you like to be told what to do, you got to accept what being told what to do gives you. It's not like $1 million a year or like $2 million a year.
Definitely not.
So
Definitely not.
you just got to accept that.
Yeah.
But if you want to change, you just got to have agency. And by agency, I mean like if you are in El Salvador's prison, right? Maximum security, you're there. There's no way out. But you can make one phone call. Who would you call? That is the person with the highest agency that you know. It's the person that it's not going to say like, I'm sorry, Mike, I'm not a lawyer, man. I don't know what to do. They're going to be like, I'm going to figure it out. Don't worry. And to tie that into like today's like reality, right? Where we've got like hundreds of sales reps, hundreds of setters, like a big operations. There's still people that come and go that like they don't have that level of agency that it required for them to act on the position or level up on the position.
That's right.
And the agency is the most important thing that you can have these days because the knowledge, it's almost commoditized. And it's now in a point where it's like intelligence, right? You don't really have to read that book anymore. Like you just have to understand what you want to learn. Ask ChatGPT and it will give you better answer than like the 80% of all the blog posts that were once available, you know? So it's like anything that you want to learn, you can pretty much learn, but you have to understand that the agency and the focus are the two biggest drivers that are going to set you apart. So I know it's a long story, but I think it ties greatly like to your initial comment, right? What if someone like didn't have that upbringing, what they can do about it if they want to be more driven? It's just like, first of all, my upbringing wasn't good. Like it was great to a sense of like, my parents were good. They didn't divorce. Like I had siblings and stuff. But my dad, like that drive came with like a lot of like aggression, you know? So it wasn't something that it's like inspiring. It was frightening sometimes.
I got you. Yeah, same way for me.
So it wasn't like, oh my God, my dad is a hero and stuff. It was like, holy shit, he's at home. Oh my gosh. I mean, like, so, you know, people just got to understand that.
Yeah.
What drives people sometimes, it doesn't come from like this enlightenment, like beautiful, inspirational source. Sometimes it comes from like dark sources,
Chip on the
which if you take it for good, it will set yourself up to accomplish
How
what-
you use it matters.
Absolutely, right? Like if let's say there's that story that a lot of people talk about, right? That is like if you and I we're bricklayers and we're putting together this church, and I ask you like, oh, so what are you working on? Like, what are you building? And you say like, oh, this is just another project. I'm just building this thing here and should be done in like 2 weeks. But if you ask me and I say, I'm building the house of God, you're doing the exact same thing. You have the same inputs, but the context at which you're taking what you're doing is just in a next level. Right? So regardless of where you're at, you can be working at McDonald's. You can be working at Dunkin' Donuts. You can't be unemployed right now. But if you understand where you want to go and you have the agency and you're willing to pay the price, there's almost nothing holding you back these days accomplishing a life of like financial stability and success, as long as you're willing to pay the price. And that's what trips most people up. They do want to be able to chill, to watch Netflix and all that stuff. And obviously like balance is good to a certain level.
That's right.
But I think balance, it's also excuse most people give that it's like socially acceptable
Yes.
to justify their unwillingness
Mediocrity.
to get uncomfortable. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but it's just the unwillingness to go to the dark side, to that dark place, which I respect. I mean, it's not good sometimes. It's very painful. It's not for everybody. And I mean, like, if you feel fulfilled with what you've got, I mean, you already have a lot more than a lot of like $100 million CEOs that I know. So it's also good to put it in perspective.
That's right. That's right. Do you feel fulfilled? Man, there's so much you said there, dude. I just want to hit on some of the points there, and then I want to get into how you came across Ken and Rich and ended up ultimately at One Call Closers. But what I basically heard you say is from the beginning, like you were on this mission to make money is kind of what I heard. That's been your intention. You've been trying to figure it out, getting into the Amazon publishing to getting on the next venture from there, to even having to work at a car wash after that. You reminded me of something Hormozy talks about, Alex Hormozy, all the time. He just says you don't know which business is going to ever hit. Like, we don't know what the next thing is going to hit, but if you don't try, you're never going to know which one is, and you're probably not going to get it on the first or second or third. I think he talks about Gym Launch was his business or project that he was working on that actually blew up and had success, right? But before then, like, he struggled, he failed, he got these experiences. But what I also heard you say later, Antonio, is all those experiences, or quote unquote what people deem as failures, or what I look at as experiences, is what prepared you for that moment at the internship in Santa Monica. And I think one thing people need to understand that's so important here, guys, and we talked about this recently, and I've heard Bedros talking about this since the day I've had the pleasure of working with him, is people always overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and right, they're underestimating what they can get done in 5 or 10 year increments. And this is like a classic case, because where you are today is a totally different spot where you would be 5 years ago, right?
100%.
Apples and oranges here. So I wanted to make sure I touched on that. And I want to say, dude, like, Antonio's a top earner, guys. Like, this guy knows how to make money. He makes money, right? And he's probably one of the top earners within the 1CC agency. And so I think it's important for you guys to understand, like, where he came from, the things he had to go through, the quote unquote, again, failures he had to get to where he's at. But it's very inspiring, dude. I love hearing this. And the biggest thing is, you didn't give up, right? You just kept going, kept having the belief that if I just keep going without expecting anything in return, it might work, it might show, and it might happen.
I mean, the idea of like giving up on something has to be, I'm not saying you should never give up, right? Because otherwise I would still be trying to make the Kindle publishing thing happen. But
that's a great point, dude.
Yeah, it's just like,
gotta pick and choose your battles.
Exactly. You gotta pick and choose your battles. And one thing that you said about like, how did we end up connecting and meeting Ken? I think it's just like goes hand in hand with like picking the battles, right? Because when I was at this startup and I moved to LA, as I was telling you guys earlier, I went to visit my parents in Europe, and that was when COVID happened. And then I ended up getting locked outside of the US. And when I went to Brazil, I had a conversation with my manager. And one of the reasons they didn't do a paid internship was because I was in the US and I had a student visa. And I was like, that's fine. But now I'm in Brazil, like, can we work something out? And a lot of back and forth when they just ended up like taking too long. So I had to make a decision to like, I'm just gonna leave this thing and I don't even know what's gonna happen. And I'm just gonna go do my own thing. And that's when like I just got what I implemented at the startup, which was the outbound process. And I just started doing it to myself, like on my LinkedIn account, doing on my stuff. And that's when I met Ken.
What are you looking for when you're doing the outbound?
Just selling the process that I built.
Got it.
So to speak. That was the only thing that I knew.
Got it.
Basically. So I was
and
like,
now you have certainty and confidence because you're like, hey, not only did I take the risk and invest in myself, I actually implemented this shit. And guess what? It worked.
Exactly.
So your confidence probably boosted where you're like, you know what, dude? If I did it for this organization, I did it for free at an internship, I can definitely get paid for this.
100%. And that's what I try to implement. And I talked with a lot of people, but there was this guy called Ken.
Shout out Ken Lynch, baby.
And that was like 10 days after I left the startup. I just started. It was just like kind of first week going all in. And then he got back to me. I was like, man, I'm going to close this guy. This guy's right here. This guy's so close. And then we went a lot of back and forth. He told me it was in like this franchise and X, Y, and Z. And then I was like, dude, this guy's a hot lead. I'm never going to like let go of him in a call without booking another meeting. Like, and I just did this intuitively because I was like, man, all right, you can't do it right now, but what about like next week? I just want to make sure we're staying in touch, so to speak.
And one thing, sorry, I want to clarify clarify, did you know Bedros at the time that you're talking to him, or did you know
I
of Fit
did.
Body Bootcamp, or no?
I didn't know. Actually, I think I did know of Fit Body, but I've read Bedros' book, Men Up,
Wow.
when I was in Brazil. So I
What are
knew.
the chances of
yeah,
that?
I knew Bedros. I've already like followed him on Instagram and stuff. And when we started chatting, like it was not only until like 2 months later where we got like introduced to Rich, and I think back in the day it was you and Chandler as well that was like in a call. And throughout this 2 month process, I was talking to Ken almost every single week, and I was just trying to like, obviously, if I just wanted to close him on my services, that didn't work out very well, but I was without any opportunity, so to speak. And he was like, dude, I love what you're doing here. Like, I want to introduce you to this guy. He just started this thing, and I think you guys would do great. So let's set up a call. And that's how like I met Rich. And that was really, really in the beginning, man. Like he was asking me to call a list of leads from one of the clients and just call the leads and try to close them, like outbound. I was like, dude, easy.
It's what I do, baby.
Yeah, easy. Like, give him the list. And then, long story short, it ended up that I just got straight up into the inbound calendar right away. And I never forget.
Things got busy real quick.
I just really wanted to make this work. And I just took the opportunity. And it was just like, there was no agreements. There was commission
Took
only.
the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, like, by opportunity, I mean, like, hey, man, like, here's an email account, like, go for it, you know? That was the opportunity. There was no, like, oh, here's what you're gonna do this day, that day. Here's, like, everything done for you, you know? That was the opportunity. And I was like, all right, let's do it. But I had to start at my dad's birthday. So I literally start September 7th. At my dad's birthday at our beach house right after the launch. And I was like, dude, I'm just going to do it right now. Like, I can't wait, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just terrible. I was so bad at sales, man. But I started, and I remember this first call, dude. I was just sweating because it was super hot in Brazil. And I was just sweaty. My face was shining. I had terrible light. It was just awful. It was a bad call. And it was funny because I just kept going. And there was a day where I jumped into like one of those tools, right? That we see the call recordings and stuff to listen to the calls. Listen to Ken calls, listen to your calls. And I stumbled across a call with Rich and Trish. And Trish was like, hey, have you heard like this kid's call? Like Antonio's? And I was like, no, why? It's like, man, they're so bad. Like, she didn't say that way, but she said like, oh, he needs some work.
Yeah.
And then I sweat cold right away, man. I was like, dude, I'm going to get fired. Like, I really need to step up my game. So I did. I mean, like, I talked with Ken. I told Ken, hey, Ken, listen, man, like, I'm not that good, but I really want to get better. Tell me exactly what I need to do, and I would just do it to a T. And he was like, dude, you got to listen to the calls. You got to train the script. You got to do the role plays. And that's what I did, bro. Every day, I listened to a ton of, like, I woke up and I went to bed.
Shocker.
Just listen to the calls, rehearsing the script, role playing, saying the words out loud because I knew that English was not my second language. And I felt that like if I had like a broken English, people wouldn't trust me. You know, you got those phone calls, you know, kind of overseas.
Immediately break trust.
It's just like, you know, and nobody was going to buy like a 10K program like that, right? Unless I was like pretty good closer.
Yeah.
Right. But I wasn't. So I was like, dude, I just got to say this thing like perfectly. Tonality, everything. So I just kept going, bro. Like I kept going. I kept training. I didn't train for like 1 week, 1 hour. I just woke up and went to bed, bro. Like training.
Obsessed.
At the mirror, listening to the calls. When I was going to work out, listen to the recordings. That was just like, I just absorbed myself into the opportunity. I wasn't just like trying to get my feet wet and just seeing if it's going to work for a couple of hours, X, Y, and Z, which a lot of people do. Right. And I don't blame them. I mean, like they may be in a different stage of their life. I was like 20-year-old and I didn't have a job. So, I mean, it's a different situation. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I gave my 110% to make this work. And the way it worked was pretty interesting because it goes back to like the failures, right? I've soon realized that like we were receiving leads, but we had this list of leads that we were not like reaching out as much. And I've noticed that there was a lot of people there that I could talk to. So there was this tool that we've used called Mixmax.
Oh yeah, I remember Mix Max.
And I think I asked Ken I think I asked Ken or Marcy, something like that, to log in and see how it worked and X, Y, and Z. And then I asked for an account. And they gave me. And I just got all the leads and put it on the sequence, bro. That was all I did. And then they started replying back. And then long story short, I was getting inbound leads. I was getting better on the phones, but I was getting like my own leads. So I ended up like not relying necessarily on the leads that were just coming in through the calendar. I was just like super rudimentary, just like Sheets and Mixmax, manually importing them there and just getting back to them on Gmail. Like nothing too crazy.
Keep it simple.
But on the first month, I did $800. And I was like, okay, I did $800. I mean, I made some money.
Yeah.
And I knew how much money Ken was making. So I was like, dude, this guy is making this amount of money here.
Yeah.
So
We're not trying to talk about money here. He was
So, I
probably
mean, like-
banging out big months, 15, 20 plus.
yeah, I mean, like I saw one month he did like 25K. So I was like, dude, he's doing that. I mean, he's good. He's great. Like much better than I am. But like, I just need to practice more, you know? And long story short, like second month, I ended up doing like 15K because
Come on, 15K, baby.
yeah, that was pretty like
Second month from $800 to 15 freaking thousand.
yeah, that was very life changing for me because like first of all, I realized that like sales is how to make
Is
money.
the way.
It's how to make money. Like it's interesting because like these days, and it's what I think most people don't realize. There's the business, right? And there's marketing, customer support, fulfillment, X, Y, and Z, finance, and there's sales. And if you were to look at the business is sales.
Yeah.
Like everything happens, not like just happens to make sales, man. Like that's the reality. So sales is like the key department in the business. And salespeople are like the key people, right? And obviously it's gonna depend on what you sell. But if you're good at sales, like really good, one thing is for sure, like you're gonna make a lot of money. Like there's no doubt about it. And the skill of sales not only helps you make the money in the transaction, but if you're able to, because like sales personalities, they sometimes lack on other things. But if you're able to develop yourself on the sales skills, the management skills, and the leadership skills, I mean, dude, you can just make your own money. Like you can create your own business and you can make a really good amount of money because we're always technically selling people into things, right? Where the ability to persuade and the ability to sell would allow a great marketer, a great HR person, a great operations person to work with you. So like if you have the sales ability, it's as if you can tap into other people's ability. You know what I mean? Because you can convince them that what you're doing is a good opportunity. And if they're really good at what they do, now you have the ability to leverage their talent. So if you're in the phones right now and you're just worried about like your commissions, think through sales with more context, right? People niche themselves too much, and that is another problem. They just look through a microscope on what they're doing. But if they zoom out and they see the bigger picture, I mean, like whatever you're doing with sales right now, it's gonna set you up for like massive wins, especially if for you success means achieving a certain level of income that will give you peace of mind.
That's freaking, man, that's so powerful, Antonio, man. So there's so much I want to unpack there yet again, because I think it's important for us to talk about these things that I notice in everything that you're saying, right? And so I think number one, and I talk about this on this show a lot, and I appreciate you bringing this up. You said you took the opportunity, and I always talk about opportunities come and go. They don't last forever, man. So the fact that you saw an opportunity, you took it, I think is massive there. I find it really interesting that opportunities lead you to other opportunities. You had this idea, now that you did that for the internship in the Santa Monica business, I'm gonna start selling this into other people's businesses. That ultimately led you, right? You trusted in that process. That ultimately led you to come across Ken, who you weren't able to close, but decided I'm gonna keep a relationship with and continue to follow up with. I want to catch something here that not a lot of people might have. You read Bedros' book, Man Up in Brazil. If you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have probably known who Bedros is. That led you, I remember me, Chandler, and Rich were at a mastermind that you got invited to at Bedros' headquarters, private,
that was
a
crazy.
50K mastermind.
Yeah.
You got to spend some time with us there. And you all knew Bedros because you had read that book in Brazil, right? And the crazy thing is, this is what I'm excited to most get into because I had a similar moment. You saw a call of Rich and Trish And you're like, they were like, hey, this guy needs like work. And you said to yourself like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. And you started really, what I heard you say is you took things to 110%. I've told the story 4 or 5 times, so I apologize if you've heard it. But I always talk about, I moved to Fit Body Bootcamp. I shut down my trucking company. I committed to a 1-year lease to an apartment, and I got married all in the same month. And I left everybody and everything I knew 2 hours away to work for Bedros. And I got in there. I didn't even start off in sales. Bedros started me off in marketing because he's like, dude, you need to learn more about the marketing message before you get on the phone. So I did that. And I'm like, man, I'm not even making the amount of money I came here to make. Like, marketing's not paying bills for me, and that's not what I came here for. Anyway, a couple of months after Bedros moved me into sales, that's where I met Ken. I think he got introduced as sales director after I was there. And dude, one day Ken pulled me aside and he's like, man, Mike, I got the greatest news to tell you. He's like, come here. And he took me to that conference room we were having the mastermind. He's like, I got the greatest news to tell you, Mike. I got fired up. I'm like, oh man, what's this great news, bro? He took me to that conference room we were all sitting in. And he's like, hey bro, he's like, if you don't start closing, I got to let you go. And I was like, oh shit. Like when you talked about like you started sweating, getting some type of way, in my mind, I was like, dude, I left everything and everybody I knew for this. I just got married. Like I have a family I need to support. I committed to this. Like I don't have a choice but to figure out to make this work. And if I was being honest with myself, dude, I wasn't giving 110% effort. I was going home at 5 and I was chilling with the wife, chilling on Netflix, just jerking around, like not doing anything freaking that is going to help me propel, get to the next level, which is, hey, watching calls, watching other people's calls, watching your own calls, studying more, like being 110% committed now. I didn't get there until Ken pulled me aside and had that conversation, that what we call the come to Jesus moment. And I'm grateful for that, because if he never did that, I might have not got my act together. So I think there's something to be said about accountability there, right? And just like it's funny. I find this funny when people know they're gonna get let go and they're gonna get fired, they start performing. I don't know, for whatever reason, some magic happens. When people find out they're not going to be on the offer for very long, they start closing some deals. And it's just so funny how I always see that, but I've experienced that myself. And you kind of saw that looking at Trish and Rich talking about you on that call. So I love what you said about you stepped up your game. And then you also said, dude, you gave 110% effort. And then what I found really interesting is you took the opportunity and you asked Ken if you can just do all this stuff, right? Nobody asked you to do it. Like you said, there wasn't a playbook. There wasn't processes put in place. You figured it out. FIO, right? Bedros calls it the figure it out mentality. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing, because they're, to your point, you said earlier, they're waiting there, sitting and waiting to be told what to do. And that's not necessarily what's going to propel you in sales, at least from my experience, you know? But you're right, dude. Sales is the most important department in any organization, because, you know, marketing will get the phone to ring, but sales is going to continue to get the cash register to ring. And the only way to have a business survive is to have revenue coming in, right? And so that is the most important piece there. So, dude, that's freaking awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. $15,000. That's incredible, dude. Your second month going from $800 to $15,000. And then, so let's get into, you know, you realize, okay, like I could close. And I'm kind of looking at like, man, you're kind of an exception to the rule. You're almost like a jack of all trades. This guy went from doing this, to figuring sales out, to figuring out to the next stage. And then we can get into other stuff after that. But dude, then you came across a behemoth, and now you were prepared because you had already done the work. You scaled Dean and Tony Robbins, you scaled Robbie, you scaled other accounts within the agency. And then one day, you know, we brought on a behemoth of an account. We called it the enterprise, an enterprise style account. And you had all this experience. How did that opportunity come across? And then I know you've had huge impact that you've done there. Walk us through, dude. Like, how did that whole process go? And just any insight you want to kind of share as to what that next level looked like for you.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a series of events after that 15K month that led me to that position. But one thing you started saying, talking about the opportunity. And opportunities, they never sound as good when you face them. Because like a good opportunity, it's almost always good when you look back or it's already too late, right? If I were to tell you, like, dude, there is this stock called Facebook, like, you can invest like $20,000 from this 19-year-old. He's just doing like these profiles for like Ivy League schools. You'd be like, dude, bro, like, the hell are you doing? Like, why are you offering me this stuff? But it's like a trillion-dollar company.
Yeah.
But now, like, when it's like a gigantic company, it's no longer a massive opportunity. You know, there's so much that goes into that like you can't become a billionaire with Facebook anymore, you know? So it's like Bitcoin, for example, like, oh man, this is stupid, right? But now like the trajectory that it's taking, right? If you were to buy Bitcoin in 2010, like it didn't look like as a good opportunity. It looked like internet scammy money.
Yeah.
But now it's just like this massive thing, right? So when we are faced with opportunities, like they don't sound like we expect them to look like when we look at the established past opportunities in the current moment, right?
That's right.
So people probably say, oh man, if I had invested in Apple like 20 years ago, I would be freaking like chilling right now. But investing in Apple 20 years ago required a different level of risk tolerance
100%.
and the ability to take on opportunity and also luck, right? Because nobody would know. So that is important to understand too. Like if you're given an opportunity, you may have to realize that the ability for you to interpret the situation as an opportunity, it's what's going to transform that situation into the opportunity itself. You know what I mean?
That's powerful, bro.
Yeah.
100%.
Because I could have interpreted things totally different of like, oh, why are they talking to me like why are they talking about me like this? It's because like I'm an immigrant, or it's because I don't speak English as my first language. Like it could have taken a total different trajectory than me looking at like, man, I really like this. It's like online. It's exactly what I wanted. I see there's people making money. They told me that I need to step up my game, not directly, but I just can take this to heart, you know? And it's one thing that I even tell, like for this operation, I tell like the people that I work mostly close with, it's like, you have to understand that whatever I ask you to do, I don't want you just to do it. I want you to understand why you're doing, because there's a difference between like executing on what you're told to do and coming up with the solutions, right? And if you train people, it's like kids, right? If you train people to always expect you to tell them what to do, guess what's going to happen? They're always going to expect you to tell them what to do. So
just like kids.
With my attitude and the results that I've been able to yield, the message that I share with people that work closely with me is you have to understand enough of the context to be capable of identifying the solutions, or whenever you come with a problem, at least come with a solution. Like, don't just come empty-handed, you know? And that is reason for being let go. Like, if you come to me frequently with low agency, just problems in your hand without solutions, without really wanting to become more proactive about what you do, you're not going to succeed.
You got an SOP for this, bro?
It's just like pure grit. And Dang. I should like kind of figure out a way to properly communicate this.
That's powerful though. What you're saying like makes a ton of freaking sense.
Yeah, because it's just like, how do I get the experiences that I've had and the kind of like level of success that I've been able to yield and transform this into a message that regardless of the stage of life the person is at, the location in the world, they can just understand that like you can be a genius. You can be a very good technical person. But if you're always expecting me to tell you what to do, you're not going to level up.
Yeah.
You know? If you're not able to understand influence, persuasion, sales, you may not level up, because the technical goes up to like senior level stuff, depending on the industry that you're doing. Obviously, like if you're working in OpenAI, like you're going to be a technical guy and you're going to make $1 million. But that's like 0.0001% of people, you know, in the majority of businesses, service businesses and everything, like you got to tie in the technical with the competency of being able to kind of lead your own way within the organization, because otherwise like you're just gonna get stuck.
So would it be fair to say you try to, with the people that you work closely around, like you try to coach up or coach out, right? If you realize at some point like, okay, this person doesn't just get it and you've tried coaching them, right? You've had conversations, then at some point you have to coach out.
Exactly. And you got to start like establishing a certain level of trust, right?
Yeah.
You can just hire the person the first week, just say, bro, like if you don't level up, you're going to get fired. Like you could, but
get ready.
But you could, but it's like kind of not that much time, right? You got to be a little bit more patient. And
Yeah.
I was the impatient guy.
Yeah.
And I've looked through like 1 year, 2 years. Oh my God, this person is becoming a crusher.
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes it takes a little bit longer than you would expect, but you always have to establish the first layer, which is trust. Because without trust, you're unable to share direct and honest feedback. Conflict without, like, if people don't trust each other, they're gonna avoid conflict. And a certain level of conflict is healthy for the growth of any organization, especially when it's massive. Because if you're not conflicting,
We've had our fair share of conflicts.
Yeah.
And honestly, they've helped me get to the next level. And I appreciate him. Like I appreciate Ken. You've called me out, on different accounts we've been scaling together, and you helping on the tech side. I'm like, damn, you know what? You got a point.
If there's no conflict, what's gonna happen is quality standard gets lower. Because if you're doing something poorly, that I think, because I know you, because that's like within our level of competence, I know you could do better. But first of all, like, we don't trust each other. And second of all, because we don't trust each other, we're unable to have like a conflict, which is not like we're not going to yell at each other. We're just going to be like open and honest about the situation.
Have a conversation.
If that doesn't happen, then you're going to still be lacking on your performance, because I'm unable to tell you this. So the overall quality standard of the operations reduces. And if nobody trusts each other, nobody wants to have a certain healthy level of conflict, the quality level of the operation reduces. It ends up that like people, they avoid responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's just a recipe for like dysfunctioning operations. So if you start working with me and you kind of like, you may not be the most like technical person, because like we typically operate with like technical people, but you have the ability and willingness to evolve, that's better than if you're a genius.
Yeah.
And you don't have agency.
That's right. I look at similar way to like perfectionism, right? It's like some people like everything has to be so perfect. It's like, no, dude, imperfect action. Just move. Just get it done.
Perfect.
And I've noticed that about you. You take a lot of imperfect action.
Yeah.
You take action. Agency.
And like perfectionism is a form of procrastination, right? Because do you think LeBron James, I don't watch basketball that much, but I know he's very good. Do you think like he started, his first shot is what determined his career?
I don't
No.
think so.
So it's like, it's as if people want to like get the perfect thing out right away. But the optimization only starts when you start. Like, you can only make something better if you actually start doing that thing. And that's when it can actually get closer to what you see as like perfect. But I mean, like every single day, there's one extra thing to get better, one extra thing to improve. So there's not going to be a point where it's like perfect, There's no such thing as perfection.
That's right. Well, dude, I mean, you're dropping nuggets on nuggets, wisdom on wisdom here. Just a couple more things I want to talk about before we wrap it up, and I'd love to do this again sometime, anytime in the near future. One thing you mentioned was you wanted to discuss health, wealth, and wisdom. Do you have any, if you haven't shared anything already, can you share anything around practices or philosophies you follow in each of these areas that have contributed to your success? I think you shared quite a few of them, but if there's anything that you want to add to that.
I mean, I was in Hawaii in March, and it was pretty cool because I got to go to Hawaii. It was the first time. The waves were really good.
What island?
Oahu.
Oahu.
Yeah. And there was like a day where like the swell got huge, like 25 feet. It was like massive. And obviously I didn't surf 25 feet waves. I wish I could, but I can't. But there was a spot where it was like 12 to 15. And then I went there. But when I got there, what happened was like I paddled out, and then I met a couple guys, and then a huge sat came. And when I duck dived the wave, my leash tore. So I was like, it was super far out. There's no lifeguards. There was huge waves, and I was without my board because the leash thing like just tore. So I was
tied to your leg or your ankle?
Yeah. So there was only the little thing, but the board was gone.
Oh, the board left.
Yeah,
I got you.
I was just left like with nothing.
And
so,
how many feet?
Dude, it was
50
far,
feet,
man.
100 feet?
Dude,
200?
it was probably like 400-ish.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, it was far because like in a harbor, and there was like a huge jetty. So you had to like paddle out through the harbor to get to the actual spot. And I told the guy like, man, like I just need some help here. But the thing is that like going back to the principles, right? I knew that I just had to paddle for my life. I
Fight or flight
found
kicked in.
a new level of perseverance, of strength, of endurance, and somewhat like fulfillment in knowing that like I was capable of doing that.
Yeah.
you don't have to go through this, or you have to, I don't know, like, but through physical exercise and like tough physical things, it just allows you to break through a mind plateau that helps you succeed on other avenues of your life. I mean, if you're not fit, or I mean, if you could get fitter, it's just the easiest way to change your life because it's the closest feedback loop of improvement that you can have. Like, you can be overweight and in like 90, 120 days, you can be like in shape.
Yeah.
But it's very rare where you're like dad broke and in 60, 90, 120 days, you're a multimillionaire. But it's the same principles applied to different things. So health, wealth, and wisdom are like the values that I live by because they all stand for like the same thing in different aspects of what it means for me to be like a complete human, right? You gotta be healthy. You gotta have, by wealth, it's not like billions of dollars, but you have to have enough money to be able to enjoy life. You know,
Have some freedom.
exactly, and be able to provide to your family. So that is important. But wealth, it's not only that, right? Wealth is like how your kids perceive you, how your wife perceives you. It's just a combination of things that goes beyond money. Money can be the unhealthiest thing for somebody that is just obsessed by it and just doesn't do anything else other than think about money, right? They're gonna make money, but they're gonna to an expense of what? You know, and then the wisdom comes from like understanding that I'm not what I think, and your thoughts can make or break you to the extent of like, if you overthink things, you start believing that what you're thinking is who you are, but that's just your ego. And you can just observe negative thoughts and let them go by, and just continue doing what you're doing. Otherwise, you can just get in a rut, which I've been multiple times. You know,
How do you get out of a rut?
I try to go surfing. I think it's a pretty good thing because
Is that like a pattern interrupt in your routine, or is that pretty routine for you, like to go
I
surfing?
try to go like, I mean, like so busy these days, but I try to go like summers more because there's more light. The waves are better in San Clemente. But the benefit of surfing is that like it's so complex in a sense of you gotta read the waves, you gotta read the water, you gotta read the crowd. You gotta use a specific board. You gotta be so present to be able to do. And you can't just like be listening to music or podcasts or like checking your Slack between sets.
Could cost you your life.
Could cost my life, but it's also like I don't even have that. You
Yeah.
know, like I don't even have access to it. So it's a moment where I can just try to like reset. And it goes back to the principles, right? Because your body and mind are like very hand in hand, right? Negative thoughts can yield negative outcome in your body, and the same way like positive things that you do with your body can help you recalibrate your mind. So that's typically how I get out of a rut, but sometimes it's just not enough.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you just gotta, I mean, do therapy. I do
You're not a
therapy.
fan of taking time off though, right? A whole lot of time off. Or have you been more lately?
I mean, no. Like,
Because even going to Hawaii for me, I'm like, damn, Antonio went to Hawaii. Like, doesn't, you know?
I went to Hawaii, but I was still like working there. Like I always gotta be present, but it goes back to like what you've been the fruits of the labor to an extent of like my team has been key component. Shout out to my team. Shout out to Maria, Emmanuel, Rafael,
Come on, shout out.
Pedro. Sarah, Christian, let's go, guys. You guys are awesome. I love you guys. You guys are amazing. The best thing that I could ask for. Shout out to compliance team as well.
Let's go.
But Rafael Negron as well. You're the man. But to my point, it's like I wouldn't be able to do that if I was not like kind of setting the example of like, dude, you gotta operate this way, not because of me, like because of you, you know? Like, don't look at this as something where it's like you're just doing to pay the bills and X, Y, and Z. Like, look at the bigger picture. Look at what this is gonna give you. Like, I wanna help you become a better person. I don't wanna help you. I don't wanna be a boss to just send you tasks and stuff. I wanna help you become better. And by doing that year over year, it gives me like the opportunity to just be on Slack and just help people through Slack and be able to like spend a few days in Hawaii. But for the most part, it goes back to the drive, man. Like whenever I'm off, like I just think that
The itch is there.
there's opportunities being missed,
That's right.
you know, and there's more to do. So I know like it's cool and stuff, but sometimes it's not as cool, right?
Yeah.
Like you just got to live with that. So
I think Christian worded it best for me. He realized it's no longer for him coming from a construction background, Christian Urbino. He said it's not work-life balance anymore. It's work-life integration.
Of course, yeah.
And so that made a lot of sense to me where it's like, yeah, you may work after 5. Like there's going to be a lot of working after 5, right? But like,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's part of the gig, you know, it's part of what you want to do and not for everybody, like you said.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the perfect example of, like, not what to do, I would say is, like, people in the DMV, right? Like, you go there, you know they don't want to be there, you know? And that's not a life that I'm willing to live, you know? Because work, it's not just, like, something that you do to pay the bills. It's, like, a gateway to just elevate your life, you know? It's how you challenge yourself. It's how you're able to innovate. It's how you're able to just take it to the next level. So, like, if you take work as something that you're just gonna clock in and clock out, soon probably you're gonna be replaced by AI because anything that is predictable will likely be automated within the next few years. So having the agency is now more important than ever.
There it is. There it is. I want to wrap it up with that. Well, one tip I want to give you guys on the DMV and the people not wanting to work there, a little DMV hack for y'all.
I know this hack.
Oh, yeah, I told you the hack. I might not want to give it away then because I realized last time I went, it was like 4:55 and there was a line outside. I'm like, I got to stop spreading this. But hack, it may still work in your area. It definitely didn't work out here in Temecula. But if you walk into the DMV, even 1 minute before they close, they have to serve you. And like Antonio said, those folks are looking to get out of there as fast as they could. And at least in my experience, more often than not, there's been less lines at that time than now, except this last time. But anyway, with caution. Antonio, man, I appreciate you coming out here doing this, dude. I had so much fun. You dropped so many nuggets, so much wisdom, dude. I appreciate you, and I'm excited for the next level for you, man. So, and continue.
Thanks for having me, bro. Excited for you too, man. It's always a pleasure.
Let's do it. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.